Good morning, everybody. It is Monday, May 4th. Oh yeah, may the 4th be with you, right? Yeah. Um, Good morning. I'm Inga Cotton, and I'm here for another Turner Moms chat. And some things I wanted to highlight. So this is Teacher Appreciation Week, but it's not like any Teacher Appreciation Week we've experienced before. So I'd be interested to hear what you and your family and your school, what you were doing to recognize teachers. They've had to adapt quickly to take care of students from a distance, right? Sending home packets or preparing online lessons and using techniques that they're not used to. Teachers have been calling families or knocking on. Well, I can't really. I don't know. They can ring the doorbell, step back, right? But really, teachers have been going out of their way to help families. Even when to keep learning going, even when conditions are really different. So, even though we can't do the things we usually do to recognize teachers, we still want to honor Teacher Appreciation Week, and we can share ideas with each other and share photos. So, if you're not already a member, please be sure you join the San Antonio Charter Moms discussion group because we're going to be talking about teacher appreciation and how we're recognizing that, sharing ideas. I think one of the basic things you can do is, if you're in touch with your kids' teachers online, is write them an email and thank them, or have your kids write a note or an email and scan that or take a picture and send that in. Um, those little things can go a long way just to let people know that they're appreciated. So those are just a quick thought about Teacher Appreciation Week. Um, but the main things that we wanted to cover this week. So last week was um, kind of thinking about the future. What will summer look like? What will fall look like? But dealing with some things that were a little heavy in terms of uh, you know, when schools open back up, they might have to have different procedures. And it's kind of hard to wrap your heads around school being so different. So this week I wanted to maybe focus on some things that are more positive, what things we do have control over. One thing it's still kind of up in the air what kind of camps or enrichment activities will be open in the summer. I know that so, for example, our neighborhood pool, um, under the normal schedule, our neighborhood pool would have been open this past weekend. We had already had heard that they were pushing that back to mid-May. Well, they pushed it back again, so um, it's possible that they'll open Memorial Day weekend. It's also possible that they might have to just cancel for the summer, and some of that may depend on kind of conditions in the community, right? How many cases there are, how much community transmission there is, how much testing is going on. Um, so there's just a lot up in the air, and sometimes the best thing we can do is just, stay home and be safe. But it's hard for planners like me, right? And and thinking in terms of the things we were used to doing in the summer, we may not have access to those. So, but I'm not going to just sit back and do nothing. I will try to, work with the information I have and, plan as best I can so that my kids do have a summer that they enjoy and that we have, do meaningful things together as a family and, hopefully come out of it with more learning and more things that will prepare them for the future. So that's kind of part of what I wanted to talk about today. So I have kind of a few themes. The overall theme is the transition to summer. Um, so for us, so on the blog we have a blog post about school calendars, and my impression is that most schools are wrapping up sometime in late May. Some of them wrap up like the next to last week of May. Some of them go through the end of May. I don't know. There may be some that spill over into June a little bit. Anyway, but there's a it's yeah. So sometime around Memorial Day weekend or a little bit after that, school will be out. So this great experiment in distance learning and remote education that we've been on for the past, gosh, let's see, my kids are on week 7 of distance learning now. There's only maybe 4 weeks to go of distance learning, and then we'll all go through another transition. And in our house, considering especially we have, one person with an autism diagnosis, my son, and the rest of us who are, have shared characteristics with him. Changes in routine are hard. So, but I know things are going to change, and so we're just trying to prepare as best we can. Um, so, here are some thoughts. I've got kind of, three overall themes. One of them is um, talking to your kids about their passions, about their long-term goals. Now, this looks different at different ages, I know. Um, the other thing is kind of how do you start small? What changes can you kind of start adding to your schedule during the last few weeks of distance learning so that you're more prepared for when school gets out for the summer. And then also just thinking in terms of, part of our climate and, what things are morning activities and what things are afternoon activities and how that's going to change. So those are the themes that we'll talk about today. Okay, so talking about ask your kids about their passions, talking about big ideas. This is something. Over the weekend, we made a visit to one of the state parks. We drove to Palmetto State Park, which is east of San Antonio in Gonzales, and it's just a beautiful, very different ecosystem from what we're used to in San Antonio. So it's kind of swampy, and there's lots of dwarf palm trees, and just we saw lots of birds and lots of Spanish moss and rattan, and it's right on the San Marcos River. So it's a really cool place. So anyway, so state parks are open. You have to get your day passes in advance, and a lot of parks will sell out. So you can reserve up to 30 days in advance. So that's my pro tip is like get on there and look for things in June, and you'll be able to get some good reservations that way. But so the upside of that is that I had a captive audience for an hour or so each way. Oh, hey, Brady is waving hello. Thank you for tuning in, Brady. One of Brady's handle on Instagram has the word gator in it. And so I just wanted to mention that, no, I did not see any gators at Palmetto State Park, but we looked in the swamps. We looked pretty hard. We saw dragonflies, but no gators. But on the car trip, we had a captive audience, and so I was able to, we played music for a while, and then I kind of paused the music. It's like, okay, guys, you're stuck here. You have to answer my questions. So I was asking them like, okay, what is your dream job? What do you see yourself doing when you grow up? And so my kids are 12 and 10, which means they've had, and this is not the first time I've asked a question like this. So they're kind of used to me bugging them about it. You might get a different response depending on, like younger kids, you might get responses like, superhero or princess or, nothing wrong with that. But, you might have to, ask some follow-up questions about, well, what do you like about being a princess? Or what do you like about being a superhero? But for my kids, they've kind of gotten this question before, but it's kind of good to do a temperature check and just see like, where are they at now? Oh, okay. Brady says Brazos Bend State Park for gators. Ooh, okay. Okay, I'll check that out. That might be a little bit farther east. As long as we still do it for a day trip, I'm in. Okay, I'll check that one out. That'll go on the list. Okay. So even if you've talked to your kids before about, what do you want to be when you grow up? It can be good to check in and just see like how, based on their experiences or, kind of what they're learning about how the world works, their perspective on what they want to be might change. So I don't know. No, I didn't get permission from my kids to share like what their answers were about what they want to be when they grow up. So I'll check back with them and see if that's okay to share. But it is technology related, and so for both of them. And so I got like they're both very interested in computer science and coding, and so as I like talked to them more, I said, okay, so if that's your goal to do that someday, then let's kind of take a step back and think about like what's a skill you could learn over the summer that would get you closer to your long-term goal. And like how do we break this into smaller pieces? And that's one thing about like I mean these days we, even though we feel busy, we actually do have time on our hands because there are a bunch of things that we're precluded from doing, right? Like traveling or getting together in groups or going to concerts or the theater, right? We have to find substitutes, whether it's like watching a live streamed concert, right, instead, or watching a movie or doing virtual tours or something. Anyway, there's we have to work with what we have. So, but it does create an opportunity to, so if your kids are old enough to get them talking about what they want to do. I remember having conversations like this with my kids, even when they were like 6, 7, 8 years old. They can start to. They may not have that big of like a repertoire of potential careers like in their mind, but you can kind of pick up a theme, and even if it's something like maybe they really look up to their teachers, and then you could ask them like, well, what are things that teachers have to know how to do, right? Like um, they have to read a lot of children's books so they can have know the books to read to their students, or they have to have, really good handwriting. So let's practice calligraphy or, so it's a matter of, think about the big goal and then break it down into smaller pieces and try to find like something practical. So now I'm lucky that my husband works in IT, in cybersecurity, and so if I have a technology related question, often I can kind of pick his brain. So I asked him to help research, like, given the particular technology goal that our kids have, what are some tools? Like, do we need to get a software license for them? Is there an online course that they can do? Um, even though they're young, could they do something that's geared maybe towards high school kids or even towards college kids, or it's like a career training type course? Is there some kind of tutoring? Like like online tutoring. That's something I've noticed. Like we've had some posts about that in the group of like local charter school alumni who enrolled in college, and but their college terms are wrapping up and they're available to do tutoring. So it's remote, but if there's a subject that you felt like you couldn't really support your students in during the school year, like maybe like Latin, right? So I don't have a background in that. But you could have, over the summer, like hire a college student to, tutor your kids in Latin so they get caught up and they're ready to go by the time school starts in the fall. Um, so that's kind of what we're exploring now, right? So the idea is have a conversation with your kids about their passions and their big ideas and what their dream job might be, and then try to think of like a practical skill that they would need to know, to do that job, and then how what steps could they take this summer to start learning that skill. So if they want to be a rock star, then they need to practice their guitar, right? If they want to be a chef, then maybe they can do more cooking in the house, or plant a garden so they have ingredients or things like that. So um, and the nice thing about there's something that's like well, if you can incorporate it into a project, something that they can create, something that has kind of a finish line, that's helpful as a motivator, and um, it can create kind of multidisciplinary learning. Like if they have to learn more than one aspect to get to the goal. That was something that my mentors back when I was did sort of emergency homeschooling, sort of sudden homeschooling for my son when he was in kindergarten. My homeschool mentors gave me a book about project-based learning, as a way. It kind of looks at things differently. Like another approach is to look at like the TEKS and the standards, and to say, okay, well, this is what a fourth grader is supposed to cover. So how do I find materials that match up with that? And that's a valid way to build a curriculum. But um, I don't think that in these circumstances we necessarily have to feel bound by that. I think it's in some ways it's more important to have the emotional connection with our kids and have them be working on things that they're passionate about, and so it's incumbent on us as adults to be good listeners to them and to introduce them to things and guide them, but also pay attention to how they're responding to what they're learning. And you know, remember that learning is in service of larger goals of like leading a full life and being a good person, um, and that's what we want for them. So okay, so another thing that I wanted to share this morning, thoughts about transition to summer, um, is like how to kind of ramp up and add things, because I think one thing I'm worried about is school suddenly ending at the end of May, and then not knowing, not having enough structure to our schedule. And Yeah, I worry about kind of drifting back into that kind of lost feeling of, do you remember spring break week 2? That was kind of weird because like, in some ways, it still felt okay to just kind of like have pajama day and watch movies and, eat snacks. But I could feel like wanting more structure back, right? Of like, okay, which days are we gonna go for walks? When is mealtime? When is work time? And like bringing that structure back in, right? So, um, I don't like, in some ways it's liberating to just be like, we have all this freedom, but then for me, I felt kind of lost and I felt unproductive and I felt a little grouchy and like I wasn't sleeping well. Um, so I don't want the first week of summer, to be that kind of that aimless feeling. Like I want to feel like instead it's like the first step on a journey, right? And also I want my kids to kind of start building some of these habits. Okay, so what we're trying to do is think about, now, but like over the next few weeks, they are still busy doing their remote learning packets from school, and it's they go to a rigorous school. It takes a substantial amount of time. So so we're not going to jump in and just do like I'm not going to give them like double math, right? With like, okay, here, do your math packet for school, and then okay, here's the math packet that I'm assigning you. It's like, no, that's not practical. So but we are looking for little things to add in gradually. Okay, so for example, so my son had a semester of PE in the fall, but this semester in school he has music instead. He does not have PE. So now my daughter still has PE, and her teacher is assigning them like little workout of the day in Google Classroom. It's really cute. It's like do this many squats, do this many like chair sits, or yeah, just yeah, it's really cute. So elementary PE, sort of CrossFit style remote learning. Yeah. So, but what we're doing is we set up a so actually I myself and like while I was doing it, I was like, I can't believe I'm actually doing this. This is like one of the nerdiest things I've ever done, and that's actually saying a lot for me because I'm a big nerd. But I actually set up Google Classroom for our homeschool, and I created like a little homeschool PE unit for them. And right now it is very basic. It's like just a few times a week, and has a little list of things to do. I do it with them so that it's not like me telling them to do it. It's like we're all in this together. And right now it's very minimal. It just takes a few minutes, but I'm thinking by the time summer rolls around, you know, we might have some stuff to do. Now I've researched there are other systems that kind of do what Google Classroom does, and actually you don't even have to really do it in Google Classroom. You could use, um, I mean, you could use calendar events, and you can do it on Outlook or in Apple or things like that. So it's really, I mean, basically, what Google Classroom does is it integrates a bunch of things in the G Suite, and puts kind of a classroom overlay on it, right? Um, that's basically what it does. So I mean, you can accomplish those functions with other types of software, and there's other like learning management systems that schools use, and I kind of wonder if those systems are going to offer like sort of home edition versions. I don't know. I've thought about reaching out to them and be like, can I have like a trial version just for our homeschool? Um, so yeah, but I mean, do what works for you. If you have like a chalkboard or a whiteboard on the wall, and that's where you want to write it down, like they do in the CrossFit boxes, right? If you have like Outlook or calendar on your iPhone or some system like that. So we have Google calendars. Years ago, I set up Gmail accounts for the kids, and now they actually do use their Google calendars. I can access it from my phone, so I can see what's on their calendar. I can add stuff to their calendars, and I'm trying to show them how they can put stuff on, right? So if they have Zoom calls, because and sometimes I just feel like I'm the Zoom concierge for my kids. But I'm trying to like help them learn to manage things like that on their own more. Um, it's a matter of making it age appropriate, and how much technology you want your kids using. And of course privacy concerns and things like that. So if you want to do a paper planner, that works too. Um, it's a good skill to learn. So, but the upshot of this basically is, I don't want to just hit the first week of summer and feel aimless again like we did during spring break week 2, because it was an uncomfortable feeling to not have a sense of like goals or purpose and just like so much uncertainty. Um, and so I'm trying to think ahead about what things we'll be adding to this calendar kind of that we want to have, pretty well developed by June. And then how do we kind of build those habits starting now, and what tools we can use. Um, so I mean, PE is one example. There's other things we're working on, but I don't know. I feel a little embarrassed about sharing them yet because they're kind of still in the development stage, I guess. um, but I'll share as I kind of feel more organized and more confident about it. Um, I guess so. The final kind of transition to summer aspect I wanted to talk about today is, just uh, with our climate and sort of what our morning activities and what our afternoon activities. And so I think that the forecast temperature in the afternoon is going to get up in the high 90s, and it's whereas before, we could take just go for a walk in the neighborhood. Actually, I think we are going to do that today, but it may be our that may be our last like afternoon walk for a while, because just just the temperature is just going to get too hot. And so we're kind of reworking our schedule so that things that we were doing in the afternoon, we're switching to the morning so we can do it in the cool of the day. Um, and we're having to move some of our like learning time into like either later in the morning or move it to the afternoon. And it's something where I hope my kids can adjust. And I know it's going to change up their expectations a little bit. Um, and I feel like we just got in a good routine of doing our walks in the afternoon. We kept that up for like, at least 6 weeks, I think, and then here we are changing it again. But it's our climate, and it's a necessary thing that it's really just not safe to be you know working out in the heat, especially if you are wearing a mask. That can make it harder to breathe. And I mean, I guess the advice is that if you're exercising strenuously, you don't have to wear a mask as long as you still maintain social distancing. So, but if we're just going for a walk, we try to keep our masks on, just to be on the safe side. So, yeah, and I mentioned earlier that, I mean, in the past, our summer routine has been that we would go to the neighborhood pool a lot. And at this point, I really don't know if it's going to open later in the summer or if it's just not going to open at all. Um, and that's another thing. So, in the past, we've had my son's summer birthday parties at the pool, and I just don't see that happening this year. So we had a conversation over the weekend about, what his birthday would look like. Um, does he want like letters or calls or videos or things like that? And we actually visited a friend of ours. Her son had his birthday, and what they did, they had kind of a drive up birthday, so you could like go to their cul-de-sac and roll down the car window and wave. They had a cooler full of paletas, and you could, pick a paleta out of the cooler and clean your hands and enjoy your paleta. And wish happy birthday to the birthday boy. And so even though it wasn't the same as a typical birthday party, it was still something. And I'd be interested to hear what kind of you know birthday customs, or sort of how are we celebrating events these days, even while we have these restrictions on what we can do. So if you have thoughts about that, share in the group, comment on under this video, and maybe we can learn from each other about how to celebrate. Okay, so those were my kind of thoughts about summer transition. Talking to your kids about their passions, and coming up with ideas on how to get them there. Um, Thinking about how to avoid aimlessness in the summer by starting some new habits now so that they can kind of become full blown activities when summer starts. And then changing up your schedule based on the climate, that it's gonna get really hot in the afternoons from now on for the next few months, and some things that were afternoon activities are gonna become morning activities, and so it's time to change up your schedule for that. Um, so we have a couple of guests lined up this week for Charter Moms Chats. Tomorrow we have a guest author, Becca McNeil, and she's been working on a series about special education. So we've had a couple of her posts published already, and there are more in the pipeline. So we're going to be talking to her about that series and what she's learned so far. So since I have a child with special needs, that's an issue that's very close to my heart. And we planned this months ago that we'd have a series over the summer about special education with 2 posts a month. So I'm looking forward to having Becca on Charter Moms Chats and having y'all get to know her. And then later in the week, we're going to be talking to a Brooks family about their distance learning experience. So those are our guests this week for Charter Moms Chats, and I will be back online at 9 a.m. on Tuesday. Okay, talk to you later.